I was reading the report where it says we can't really document apparently whether services have been rendered. Is there any indication here that there's been overbilling as a consequence of the lack of documentation or trail of documents?
Madam Chair, Mr. Fisher, we did visit the mental health professional and asked for copies of some of her meeting notes where she redacted personal information that we were able to tie to the invoices. So through sampling, we got a good sense of it seems clear that she's seeing someone. We couldn't see their names. We wouldn't recognize their names anyhow. We don't know all the officers in the police department, but we weren't concerned that these meetings weren't happening. There might have been some concern that some of the work that we sent her way wasn't related to critical incidents or the way these should be invoiced, and that can be cleared out in future contracts. But because of the amount of people that she was invoicing for, it wasn't overly alarming in that respect. And we didn't have any cause to believe that she was billing for people that she wasn't seeing.
Thank you.
I guess maybe I'll add on to that and just keep you guys here a little bit longer. Because there's no previous records or historical records of referrals, it's really hard to say. But we've had the person who's the referring officer now has documentation, so we could get a good sense of lately those invoices look good, but in the past, all that information is gone.
If I could just summarize what I think I understand is that you really can't easily track whether the billing is related to actual persons seen, but you have no indication that there's been overbilling or some kind of fraud as a consequence of this program. Would that be accurate?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. It seems that there's no more questions, Mr. Tetzel. Thank you for this body of work. It's important because it furthers our efforts of having healthy officers who are ready to serve in their best capacity. I appreciate the police department's commitment to audit and to these findings, and I know that you'll continue to work with them on the follow-up for these recommendations. So with that, may I have a motion to receive this report and direct staff to publish it?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor of this motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it, so this report will be received and staff will publish it. Last item on our agenda, Mr. Tetzel has also prepared an update for our committee. Mr. Tetzel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We actually discussed this earlier based on Mr. Neal's question, but this is an overview of the projects that were removed from the 2016 audit plan and the projects that were deferred. In progress, conveniently so, but it'll probably never happen again. We are not in the middle of any audits. We've finished all the audits that we were planning to do this year before this committee meeting, so we're not halfway done with anything. Because follow-up is going to be a larger and larger component of the work that we do and the work that we present here, we're formalizing that process. We're coming up with a cadence rather than trying to chase people down to get answers before an audit committee meeting, because that's never been a very successful endeavor on our part. So what you can expect from us is we haven't decided, either 3 or 4 times a year, we're going to go through the follow-up process, either get a status update that the completion dates for the remediation plans are still in line, and anything that's done that we've evaluated to whatever extent we deem necessary based on the criticality of that recommendation, and then we'll close that finding and we'll report that information to the committee. We'll also have the park board's information on a separate table or deck so that it can be easily shared by Commissioner Walensky with the Park and Rec Board of Commissioners. We've also experienced periodic confusion about how audits work, what the steps are, what happens afterwards. And so we're creating some ways to help disclutter the confusion that some of our clients have around what a consultation is, what an audit is, how that works, what findings are, how you close them. So there's less surprises or people forget what we talked about 6 months ago. So we're working on some flashy marketing and communication tactics to help alleviate some of those potential surprises that come up every now and then. As you know, we provide an update of the city and now the Park and Rec Board's remediation of the state auditor's findings. So on the next 2 slides, you'll see that one for the city, all of the findings from their 2015 CAFR audit were corrected except for the network and system access termination, which is planned for March of 17. And for the Park and Rec Board, they have mentioned to us that all of their items have been corrected. Again, we're just corroborating this information. We're not validating that these findings have been corrected. The state auditor will do that when they come back. So if we see these as corrected and they pop back up, either we fixed it but something else happened. A lot of times the state auditor's findings titles are related to new findings, but it's not the same thing, and so the finding might carry forward, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's the same problem. We'll try to help clarify that, but also the state auditor can clarify that too when they come and present their findings. Here's a table of the follow-up that we're working on right now. These are all the projects where we had an outstanding remediation efforts at the beginning of the year. The number of recommendations, how many were closed during the year, and where the status was at year end, and also sort of a date range of when we anticipate these to be addressed. So as you can see, here in 2017, we're going to have some work to do with the follow-up piece. And to remind you, when someone says they've remediated a recommendation from an audit, we don't just say cool and put a check mark by it. We go in and ask for evidence for them to demonstrate that they've actually done that work. Depending on how contextually what the finding looks like, some of them are, we didn't have a policy and now we have a policy. That's really easy to do. Some of them are, we were processing these transactions incorrectly, and so we need, going back to remediate those is more work because we had to go back, get the population, take a sample, look at the attributes, pull the supporting documentation. So how much work it takes to close these can really vary pretty greatly. So some of these you'll see that, and we'll try to figure out a way to do this, that the department has determined that they've remediated it, but we haven't yet finished our work in validating that it is actually remediated. So we'll teeter with how much information we give you, and then expect feedback on we don't need this much, or we'd like a little bit more. So we'll see how that goes. We're pretty comfortable with where we are right now. I'm not alarmed at anyone's progress, and we do follow up. If something's due 2 years out, we'll follow up at least a couple times a year to say, are you still on track? Are you still on track? So we can manage that sort of expectant date. We don't want to just wait until 2 years and they say, oh, we totally forgot about that audit finding, because that would be a bummer, if you will, for everyone. Any questions on follow-up?
One from Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Tetzel, in order for follow-up purposes, do you keep a calendar or something that tickles you every once in a while and you should ask a question?
Madam Chair, Mr. Fisher, yes, we do. Well, we're establishing that now. We're still toying with, is bugging people 4 times a year too much, or should we do it 3 times a year? And so we're establishing a calendar where we say, here's where we'll send out email reminders, here's where we'll make phone calls, here's where we'll expect them to provide us information back, and then create this this report, and then whichever audit committee falls after that, you'll get the most recent report that we created, rather than trying to create one for every audit committee meeting. So there might not be a new one if we have 2 meetings in one calendar quarter. We might not have an updated follow-up report for both of those meetings. It might just be one.
And Jerry, just 2 more questions, if you don't mind. In reviewing the follow-up report on the records management audit, forgive me, I Googled this and I couldn't find anything. What is IG ordinance?
I can actually take that one, Mr. Fisher. An information governance ordinance is what we've decided was the best and most appropriate follow-up from that. That information governance ordinance is supposed to be coming through committee of the whole tomorrow, but it has since been delayed by efforts with our CIO and our city attorney's office. So that is part of the council agenda work as a remediation for some of those.
Well, I understand. The second question I was going to ask then is, and maybe it's been explained already, if it's in the city council, why it's been pushed back. We had an original date for the due date. Now it's pushed back to January here. And then a similar question with IT program and PMO, which looks like this is supposed to be done in 2016, and now we don't know when it will be done. So I'm wondering what's happening with those.
Madam Chair, Mr. Fisher, I think some of those delays are IT getting information from other people in IT about those remediation efforts. And there was a couple delays in their execution. It's not anything that's alarming to us. Rarely do follow-up or remediation efforts become someone's top priority. The IT PMO was actually a consultation, and so we don't do formal follow-up unless we're requested to by the department, and that divisional leader, Mr. Roth, wanted us to do formal follow-up on that. So we're not as rigorous in pushing people for consultation remediations as we are with findings. But yes, I think they're still on track to get those done. They might be done now. They have to do some internal confirmation of information within IT and then get that back to us. I'm happy to see that you're reviewing that information. Appreciate it.
Yeah, those are good questions. Other questions, thoughts? So before, and I do take this back, I thought this was the end, but I realized I pushed the 2017 audit plan to the very end. May I take our director's update and have a motion to receive and file this update?
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Your audit report will be received and filed. So last before us is the 2017 annual audit plan. So Mr. Tetzel, go ahead with this plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In 2017, we have 8 projects on the docket on our audit plan. I'll forewarn the committee again. Our audit plan changes somewhat frequently. We try to use professional discretion when emerging issues come up, and we think a project is of more importance or needs to be done more timely than something that exists on the plan already. So I'll quickly walk through the 8 projects and then answer any questions that we have on those. These are in alphabetical order, if I'm not mistaken. The first is third-party audits related to the IT department. So we are going to be looking at a few key IT vendors and doing some third-party audit work around service level agreements, adherence to contracts. Our IT audit, our outsourced IT audit consultants have a very defined expertise in auditing third parties, and so they have audit programs designed that we can use with some of these vendors that are specific to the services that they provide. The second on our list, and you'll remember this from 2016, is an audit of the off-street parking operator. This 2017 will be the second year of that 3-year contract. It remained the same vendor from the prior contract in place, but I think there was different contractual terms. If I'm not mistaken, this is the largest contract that the city has out there, so it's a big spend, and it's something worth looking at. The third is a payroll audit with a focus on fraud risk. So not looking at payroll processes within the controller's department. The state auditor reviews those. We're looking more at where people are circumventing those controls. We're really digging into the data with our analytics tool to see if there are things like ghost employees out there, people over-reporting, people that are getting payroll that are no longer part of the city. It can be hard to do that because you have to report your time, whether you're not just report PTO like some organizations do, but report all of your time. But we've learned enough through our access termination work and some other things that it's a good thing to look at from a fraud risk perspective. Also in 2013, the prior audit team did a payroll audit, so we'll quickly go in and validate the remediation efforts on those findings were appropriate. This was another carryover from last year. We're going to do some readiness testing for the state required body cam audits. This is a biannual requirement that needs to be done by an internal auditor. The city is still determining whether or not our internal audit department should be seen as an internal auditor to do this work, or if it needs to happen outside the city. The question remains, but we are, in the meantime, doing some readiness work there to make sure that in looking at that legislation, translating that into what does this actually mean from how can we test this and evaluate it, do that initial evaluation and see where we need to make improvements. So when we are required to submit those independent audits to the state, that we've shored up any gaps or deficiencies that we might have there. Did the same thing this year with license plate reader, and that went well. The third one on this page is Police Records Management System implementation. This is probably the third year that it's been on our audit plan. The police department a long time ago asked for help on this, but they weren't in a place from an implementation phase for us to do anything except for stay informed about where they are in the process. They've now selected a vendor, they're doing requirements testing, and so this year they'll be ready to engage us so we can help them understand what are some of those high-risk areas of an implementation like this, and do some limited work to give them the confidence that both the vendor is doing their job in this implementation. In this case, the software vendor also helps with the implementation, which is not always the case. Like People Software, you just buy it and you have to find someone else to help you put it in. But IT has some pretty key elements here with integrating this new system with other existing systems. This one has 17 integrations, system integrations, which is quite a few, and those can be pretty tricky. I think we have information that goes to the county, potentially to the FBI or to the federal government. There's a lot of information that comes in and out of this from other places, and those are the components that can really get in the way of this becoming a successful implementation. Last two, finance and the city attorney's office has asked us to get engaged with a audit of risk management, workers' compensation, claim management. We're still scoping out what this body of work looks like, but it will cover the enterprise risk management division within the finance department, probably looking at processing workers' comp claims and some activities within that department. Lastly, because we're doing so much third-party work this year, we've also decided to do another third-party audit of a city vendor yet to be determined and announced. And it'll be another one that is pretty high up on our spend list, critical to city activities. And once we initiate that work, we'll notify the audit committee of the vendor that we've selected to go forward with there. Any questions on the audit plan?
Commissioner Walensky.
Since I don't work with the city, I can ask this question. Are you guys got enough budget and people to do this?
Do we have enough
Yeah.
people? Madam Chair, Commissioner Walensky, yeah, I think so. We got an additional head count through the mayor, and that was approved by council, that we can now work towards hiring, which I've begun the process with HR. It's hard to figure out how much work you can do. And if you look at the past, well, if you look at last year, there were 5 projects that either got moved to 5 out of 14 that were either moved to this year or potentially moved further out. My gauge throughout my career is that one full-time person can do on an average of 2 audits per year. So if we have 2 people that are focused, purely on doing audits, that's 4. If you add me and we hire some interns, that's a little bit more. The one thing that we strive for is to not over communicate things that people don't care about. So we really focus on high risk areas, and we try to do a lot of research and benchmarking to make sure that the work we're doing would matter. We don't want to do something and tell you guys and a department about issues that we found that no one cares about, because really that just means we're not doing the right work, that we should have focused somewhere else. So we try to be somewhat surgical in the work that we do. And if you've seen any other sort of yellow book or government type of audit report, you're looking at anywhere from 50 to 250 pages where we try to really concentrate the communication that we have out and just get the important stuff out to you, rather than tell you everything that they do right, everything that they do okay, everything they did wrong. We really just try to focus on those high-risk areas. So I think so.
Good. I didn't ask that just to be a pain. I did notice that they needed to bring on someone halfway through last year. I think they had an extra additional 0.4 FTE or something that I noticed brought on. So I was just hoping that that had been addressed and that you had gotten a better handle on exactly how much work your staff could handle. I know with our park board goals every year, a lot of them seem to get pushed up because a lot of people overestimate their abilities and how much they can do. And I just wanted to make sure this was pretty clear that you're on track. I'm new. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Probably a follow-up to the last question. I was going to ask, are there areas that you would like to audit or consult on that you can't fit in the current year audit plan? And then I raise a question in my mind about this committee and what we think should be looked at. I don't know enough about all the city systems or the critical parts of the city systems as you've identified to be able to tell you or advise you or this committee whether there are areas that we should be focusing on. So it's a 2-point question. How can we work with you to determine what the real critical issues are? What are the things that are really at risk at the city that we think we should look at as a committee to help you determine what your audit plan would look like? And then that second question, do you believe you're targeting the right things now, and are there other things on your agenda that may rise up in priority in the future?
Madam Chair, Mr. Fisher, it's an excellent question. It's what we don't know, right? My job is to meet with department heads, divisional leaders, people within the city, and have discussions with them to try to pull those things out, because we're such a small team and we're new to the city, newish, that we don't know. And so we rely on people to help us understand what's going wrong. So to simplify what that conversation really sounds like, it's what has to go right, what could go wrong, and are we doing anything about it? And part of my job and what I've been really working on here is to help people understand how to even talk like that. It's not something that people just naturally think about on some periodic basis of here's all the stuff that could really fall apart and what am I doing about it, because you just get caught up in in what you're doing. So part of my responsibilities as the city auditor are helping people think about that and have those conversations and be conversant in the way that we can most easily intake some of this information. As a side note, our team has gone through just by city department and brainstormed what are all the things that we think are risky that these people do. And we've come up with this large list of things and then mapped them back to city departments. And there are some risks that map to every department, and there are some risks that are solely to one department. That'll start to help us drive some of the conversation here. But as we get this new FTE on, it'll free a little bit more of my time up to work with departments even more to really say, what are you supposed to, what are the widgets that you're producing in your little factory, right, for lack of a better term? And how are you measuring how well you're doing that? Because we can't deny that as a government, we're doing something for somebody. We have customers. Let's acknowledge them. What are we doing for them? What are we supposed to be doing? Are we measuring that? What's in their results Minneapolis reports? What's in their business plans? Are they even looking at the right things? I think some of that advice can be helpful to the coordinator's office and some of those efforts, but really figuring out what is everyone supposed to be doing, which one of those, when it goes wrong, is most devastating, where are they well controlled, not controlled, kind of controlled. The control is outsourced to a vendor, and we're just either managing that, their oversight of that, or blindly relying on their expertise to do that. So there's a long road ahead from that perspective. And up until probably last year's audit plan, we're really relying on the low-hanging fruit that departments gave us, right? Like there's been a lack of internal audit at the city for a long time. There was an internal audit department for a few years in place. Before that, there was someone doing fraud, waste, and abuse work through the Board of Estimate and Taxation. And so the city hasn't had a long-standing, sustainable internal audit department that we can really, rely heavily on all the information that's kind of been historically produced there. We're sort of starting from scratch. And so it'll take a while for us to really get comfortable that, yes, we're confident that this is the most important work that needs to be done. There's a lot of different ways that you can look at it. You can see where the money's going through the budget. If you look at the budget, public safety, huge, the biggest categorical expense of the city. Well, should that be reflected in our audit work? Maybe, but who else is doing work in that space? What are the second lines of defense, right? There's this civil rights, working with the PCOC, doing some work there. The PD has started an internal quality assessment program, and that's where we're collaborating with those groups to say, what are you not looking at that we should be focused on, knowing that we should also not ignore the things that they're working on, because we need to be looking at everything. So it's a tough question to answer, and I don't know if I would ever be confident that everything we're doing is the most important stuff that needs to be done. But in building relationships with departments, I want to push some of that onus on them, that like you need to work with us and help us understand where we can help you. Because I look at the work that we do as helping departments better manage risk. We're not in the business of dragging people through the mud. That's not rewarding to us. And so once we get people to think about risk the way that we like to think about it, and be able to communicate that to us effectively, we can do a better job.
I appreciate that, and believe me, I have been an auditor and I've been audited, and it's always better to do it in a collaborative environment. It would be helpful to me, Madam Chair, as a council member or as a committee member, being over myself, committee member, to have a better idea of what the real critical issue areas of city governance may be. And I'm not saying that we're going to drive audits down people's throats, but to get a better idea of where our real risk areas are. And I'm confident, Mr. Tetzel, that you and the audit team are focusing on that, but it'd give me better education to have an idea of what those critical areas are as well, if there's something that might be available.
Madam Chair, Mr. Fisher, a lot of auditors will produce heat maps, and they'll go through either departments or large scale areas of an organization and say, well, this could happen. The magnitude of that happening is high, and the frequency of that high. Therefore it's red. The prior auditor had KPMG come in and do that, and IT was all bright red, and so therefore you would think we should be auditing all IT stuff, but I don't know if that's really, we can't overstrain a department by auditing them so much. I think by doing some work in an area, we also need to give them some breathing room, or let them collect themselves, fix some of their issues, and then potentially come back later to address that. So it's, and some of it is really just people's opinions. Some people might think that the city's fiduciary duty is more important than public safety from an internal audits perspective. And so how do we think about that, and how do we accomplish that? I do look at a lot of other cities' audit plans and see what they're auditing. There's a lot of good ideas out there, but a lot of other cities follow have had an internal audit department that's been along for much longer. And so they do more of like a cycle, right? Like we aim to get around to all the different departments within this organization in 5 years or 8 years, and they have enough staff to be able to do that. We don't. And I don't know if that's the best way to try to handle things, but we've got feelers out there, both within the city and what other cities are doing through our professional organizations that we are members of, and we try to do our best. It's one of the reasons, because we're still learning how the city works and what goes on here, and people trusting us enough to confide in us with some of their problems, that our audit plan changes. And it might not be a new issue. It might just be an issue that someone's finally ready to talk about, or realize that internal audit can actually help us with this. So let's go to them and get some help.
Mr. Tetzel, with that we've gotten through a lot of the low-hanging fruit these first couple of years, and since we've now turned over a couple members of our committee, I do agree with Mr. Fisher. It's time to connect committee members again, maybe into that. So without any formal kind of motion, could I ask that we have some more dialogue about this that isn't maybe on the dais, but could we make that an effort for this year to have maybe an open study session with audit committee members or something like that, to really walk through that in a way that's open to the public, to make that an initiative of 2017?
Madam Chair, I think that'd be a great idea.
Okay. I also wanted to mention something that I thought was really great that our new audit department has done, although it's it's quite hidden, and I don't know that you've received a lot of input to it, is that we do have a way for anybody, not just residents, but anybody on the internet or internet enabled, to submit ideas or thoughts about what could or should be audited. Right now, that catchbox or whatnot, you have to actually get to our internal audit department's website to give that idea to our audit team. But I do hope there's a way that, especially as you take on new staff, we can do something to make that more visible, because that truly is a part of earning and maintaining the public's trust, and being there, having internal audit is a way to serve the public with public trust from our governance structure. So thank you for doing that. I wish it were more prominent somewhere. Okay. Is everyone comfortable enough? Could I have a motion to receive this 2017 annual plan for now, as is?
So moved.
Great. Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? With that, colleagues, we've completed all the items on our agenda today. So without any further business, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.